Welcome to WikiPodcast, your shortcut to staying well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into the extraordinary life of Sir Winston Churchill, a true voice of defiance and, well, one of history's most compelling figures. As part of our History Maker series looking at revolutionaries and political icons, we're going to unpack the pivotal moments and, frankly, surprising paradoxes that shaped his remarkable journey. Get ready for some aha moments because we're about to explore what truly made this icon tick.
It really is an incredible story. It spans, decades of huge change for Britain and the world. And what's really striking, I think, is how his formative years, which were quite challenging, and even his early setbacks, sort of laid the groundwork for the leader he became.
Yeah, let's start right there at the beginning. Born into aristocracy, Blenheim Palace, 1874. But his childhood sounds, surprisingly difficult.
It does. His parents, Lord Randolph Churchill and Jenny Jerome, they were prominent figures, but often distant. So he was largely raised by his nanny, Elizabeth Everest. He called her his dearest and most intimate friend. That bond seems crucial.
Absolutely. That stability must have been vital when his parents weren't perhaps providing it. And despite the privileged background, he wasn't a star student initially, was he?
Not at all. He struggled quite a bit academically, moved between a few schools before finding his footing at Harrow, really aiming for a military career. And then his father died when Winston was only 20. That must have had a huge impact, really drove him.
To prove himself, you imagine, and he certainly did. He got commissioned into the 4th Queen's Own Hussars, but wasn't content with just, routine duties.
No, he actively sought out action. He even used his mother's influence to get postings, like serving as a war correspondent over in Cuba with the Spanish troops.
So these adventures, were they just about thrills? Or was there more to it?
Well, definitely more. His time in British India, for example, wasn't just military action. It sparked this really rigorous self-education project. He just devoured books, Plato, Darwin, Macaulay, huge thinkers. And it was around then he called himself a liberal in all but name. And interestingly, agnostic, too, in his personal beliefs.
That's fascinating. That intellectual independence, you can see it cropping up early. It foreshadows his later willingness to sort of cross party lines, doesn't it?
Exactly. He prioritized his own convictions. And this reading fed directly into his writing. His first book, The Story of the Malacan Field Force, got good reviews. He even tried his hand at fiction with Savrola.
And the writing wasn't just a career move, was it? It became a kind of defense mechanism.
Yeah, against what he famously called his black dog, his recurring depression.
Yeah.
That phrase is so telling, isn't it? It shows a vulnerability. But maybe that struggle also fueled his incredible drive and output. Writing was an essential outlet.
So the military action continued. Sudan.
Right, the Modest War. He was there as a subaltern and journalist, even took part in one of the British Army's last cavalry charges at Omdurman. But he was critical, interestingly, of Kitchener's harsh treatment of wounded enemies afterwards. Even then, you see glimpses of a complex figure. So this mix of action, journalism, writing,
Yeah.
they all set the stage for politics.
Yeah, but so he's made a name for himself as a soldier, a writer, now Parliament.
That was the goal. He lost his first attempt at a conservative seat in Oldham, bit of a setback. But then South Africa. He went out as a journalist for the Morning Post just as the Second Boer War was kicking off.
Right.
And things got dramatic.
Ah, the famous escape.
Exactly. Captured as a prisoner of war in Pretoria. His daring escape, hiding on trains in a mine. It was huge news back home. It basically made him a national hero overnight. He came back, wrote more books, and then won that Oldham seat in 1900. He was just 25.
Wow, famous before his political career even properly began. And he toured North America, met Mark Twain, President McKinley, though apparently he didn't hit it off with Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, seems he wasn't afraid to, rub people the wrong way, even powerful ones. And that independence streak continued in Parliament. He got elected as a conservative in 1901, but pretty quickly started criticizing his own government, especially on military spending.
He felt himself drifting left, is that right?
That's how he put it. He started aligning with liberal imperialists. And he was a big believer in free trade, so he strongly opposed the conservatives' move towards protectionism. He even helped start the Free Food League.
Which led to that really dramatic moment in 1904.
Crossing the floor, leaving the conservatives to sit as a liberal. Highly controversial. He said a key reason was the proposed Aliens Bill, which he saw as appealing to prejudice against foreigners and Jews. He championed free entry and asylum.
A principled stand, even if it cost him political allies.
Definitely. And his career took off with the Liberals. Undersecretary for the Colonial Office in 1905, working on constitutions for the former Boer republics, trying to find equality. He even voiced concern about treatment of native populations in Natal. By 1908, he's president of the Board of Trade, the youngest cabinet member in decades, only 33. Quite a rapid rise.
And personally, a big year, too, 1908.
Ah, yes. His marriage to Clementine Hosier. That partnership was clearly a vital anchor for him throughout everything that followed. They had 5 children eventually.
So professionally, he's in the cabinet pushing social reforms.
Big time. Alongside David Lloyd George, they brought in things like trade boards for minimum wages, labor exchanges for jobs, even unemployment insurance. It was quite radical for the time, looking to models like Germany for state intervention. He also backed Lloyd George's People's Budget against the House of Lords, which led to the Parliament Act of 1911, curbing the Lords' power.
Then he moves to Home Secretary in 1910, more reforms.
Yes, significant prison reforms making distinctions between criminal and political prisoners, setting up libraries, reducing death sentences. Though his stance on women's suffrage was complicated, he supported it, but only with a majority male vote first, which angered the suffragettes.
He wasn't afraid of controversy as Home Secretary either, was he? Tony Pandy.
Right, the Tony Pandy riots, sending London police instead of the army. It drew fire from all sides and really damaged his relationship with the labor movement long term. And the siege of City Street anarchists trapped in a burning building. Churchill famously there on the scene, ordering the fire brigade back. Very dramatic stuff.
What shifts him towards focusing on the Navy then?
The Agadir crisis in 1911. That near war with Germany really focused his mind on naval power. So he's appointed First Lord of the Admiralty, and he dives right in. Modernizing everything, naval war staff, better pay, submarines, naval aviation. He even coined the term seaplane.
And that famous promise about battleships.
Build 2 for every one Germany builds.
Yeah,
He was determined to maintain Britain's naval supremacy as tensions rose.
which brings us to the brink of World War I.
Exactly. August 1914, war breaks out. He's overseeing the Navy, aerial defense too. He was even an early backer of the tank, using Admiralty funds to get the project going. Always looking for an edge.
But then comes Gallipoli, a major turning point, and not in a good way for him.
No. He championed the Dardanelles campaign, attacked Turkey, relieved pressure on Russia. Bold idea. But the execution was disastrous. Huge casualties, stalemate. And many blamed Churchill directly. It led to his demotion from the Admiralty in May 1915. A huge blow.
What does he do after such a public failure?
He doesn't just, lick his wounds in Parliament. He resigns from the government entirely in November 1915 and goes back to active service. Commands a battalion on the Western Front, actually saw combat, narrowly escaped death. It shows incredible personal courage, I think.
He didn't stay out of politics for long, though.
No, he came back, argued his case effectively before the Dardanelles Commission, which mostly cleared him. By 1917, Lloyd George brought him back as Minister of Munitions. He boosted production, dealt with strikes, and he supported the 1918 Act that finally gave some women the vote.
After the war, he takes on War and Air.
Yes, 1919 to 21. Overseeing demobilization, but controversially, he warned against demobilizing Germany too quickly. Saw them as a potential buffer against Soviet Russia, which he strongly opposed.
This is where some of the more difficult aspects of his record come in, isn't it? Ireland? Iraq?
It is. He supported the Black and Tans in the Irish War of Independence. In Iraq, as colonial secretary later, he authorized the use of tear gas, though it wasn't actually deployed against what he termed recalcitrant natives. He was also a supporter of Zionism, involved in shaping the post-war Middle East.
A difficult period personally, too, wasn't it?
Terribly. He lost his mother and also his young daughter, Marigold, to sepsis. Just devastating losses. Then, politically, the Chenak crisis in 1922, his tough stance against Turkey helped bring down the government, and he lost his own seat. That's when he made that famous quip, without an office, without a seat, without a party, and without an appendix.
The wilderness years began. What did he do?
Well, he painted, became quite a decent artist, actually, and he wrote his huge memoir of the First World War, The World Crisis. After a couple of years out, he rejoined the Conservatives, calling himself a constitutionalist, and surprisingly, got made Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1924.
Despite not having much finance background, how did that go?
Controversially, his decision to return Britain to the gold standard in 1925 is widely seen as a mistake now. It hit the economy hard, especially coal miners. And during the general strike in 1926, he edited the government's anti-strike newspaper, the British Gazette. That really cemented the labor movement's distrust of him. He also met and praised Mussolini in 1927 for standing up to communism, a comment that certainly hasn't aged well.
So the conservatives lose in 1929, and he's out of office again. This is the real wilderness period.
Pretty much, yeah, from 29 to 39. Again, he combats the black dog with writing massive biography of his ancestor Marlborough, his autobiography, My Early Life. But politically, he became quite isolated. He resigned from the shadow cabinet over giving India Dominion status, which he feared would lead to independence too quickly. And he made that infamous remark about Gandhi, calling him a seditious Middle Temple lawyer now posing as a fakir.
These views on empire and race are, well, starkly at odds with modern values.
They absolutely are. He was a staunch imperialist, saw the empire as beneficial, and he held racial views common to his era, making disparaging remarks about non-white people, though it's noted he opposed anti-Semitism. He even supported forced sterilization ideas back in 1910. It's a complex and often uncomfortable part of his story.
But during this wilderness period, he also started sounding the alarm about something else.
Yes, Nazi Germany. From 1933 onwards, he was one of the very few politicians consistently warning about Hitler and German rearmament. He had access to clandestine information about the Luftwaffe's buildup. He argued strongly against appeasement, calling for deterrence and alliances.
So his condemnation of the Munich Agreement in 1938 wasn't just hindsight.
Not at all. He called it a total and unmitigated defeat right at the time. People started listening then. His warning suddenly seemed horribly prescient. His popularity began to climb again.
And then, September 1939, war.
And Churchill's back. On the very day war is declared, he's reappointed First Lord of the Admiralty. The Navy famously signaled Winston is back. He made his mark during the phony war with actions like the Battle of the River Plate.
Until May 1940, the invasion of France, the Norway debate, and Chamberlain resigned.
And Churchill becomes prime minister. He later wrote he felt his whole life had been a preparation for that moment. He formed a national unity government, took the crucial role of Minister of Defense himself, giving him enormous power.
And immediately faced an almost impossible situation.
Utterly precarious. The British army retreating in France. Serious figures in his own cabinet were arguing for negotiating peace with Hitler. But Churchill stood firm. He outmaneuvered them. His resolve was absolute. Fight on. And his speeches, they became legendary. Despite that childhood speech impediment, he became this master orator.
Blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
His very first speech as PM, setting the tone. Victory at all costs. Then after Dunkirk, we shall fight on the beaches. Directly appealing to America for help too. And as the Battle of Britain loomed, this was their finest hour. Just incredible rhetoric.
He wasn't just talk, though. He pushed initiatives like the SOE, the Commandos.
Right. Told Hugh Dalton to set Europe ablaze. He was proactive. And during the Blitz, paying tribute to the RAF pilots, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
And cultivating that relationship with Roosevelt was key, right?
Absolutely vital. Securing Lend-Lease aid from the U.S. was crucial before they even entered the war. And when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, Churchill, despite his hatred of communism, immediately offered support. That famous line about making a favorable reference to the devil if Hitler invaded hell, pragmatism in the extreme.
The Atlantic Charter meeting with Roosevelt in 41, outlining war aims.
Yes, and crucially, after Pearl Harbor, persuading the Americans that defeating Germany had to be the priority, even before focusing on Japan. He kept going, despite serious health scares too, a heart attack in late 41, then gave that defiant some chicken, some neck speech in Canada.
But 1942 brought bad news.
Yeah, the fall of Singapore. He called it the worst disaster in British military history. His morale apparently hit rock bottom then.
And another very difficult issue arose around this time, the Bengal famine.
A terrible tragedy in 1943. Millions died. His government faced severe criticism, accused of delaying grain imports due to shipping priorities for the war. There were reports of disparaging remarks he supposedly made about Indians. Grain was eventually sent, but the debate over British policy and his attitude continues. It's a deeply controversial point.
He was also central to the Big Three conferences.
Tehran, Yalta, meeting with Roosevelt and Stalin to shape the war's end in the post-war world, discussing Germany's division, the fate of Poland, very contentious issues. Yalta also led to Operation Keelhaul, the forced repatriation of Soviet citizens, another controversial decision.
And the bombing campaign against Germany.
He initiated the area bombing strategy, but later, particularly after the destruction of Dresden in 1945, he expressed regret, issuing a memo trying to limit mere acts of terror. Then VE Day, May 8th, 1945. Germany surrenders. He announces it to the nation, tells the crowds this is your victory. though even then he commissioned planning for Operation Unthinkable. A potential attack on the Soviets shows his deep distrust remained.
So the war hero wins the peace?
Well, no. Huge shock. In the July 1945 general election, his conservatives were heavily defeated by Attlee's Labour Party. His campaign wasn't great, suggesting Labour would need some form of Gestapo backfired badly.
Why do you think the public voted him out?
He reflected on their ingratitude, but also admitted they have had a very hard time. I think many felt Britain needed a different kind of leader for peacetime reconstruction, someone focused on building the welfare state. The war leader wasn't necessarily the man for that job.
So he becomes leader of the opposition, still influential.
Oh, definitely. He travels to Fulton, Missouri in 1946 and gives that hugely important Iron Curtain speech, warning about Soviet influence, calling for this special relationship with the U.S. It really framed the Cold War debate.
And his views on Europe.
He was an early advocate for a United States of Europe, interestingly, but he always maintained Britain itself shouldn't join a federal structure, keep its unique position. He also remained opposed to the partition of Ireland, hoping for eventual reunification.
And he gets back into power.
Yes, after losing again in 1950, he finally wins the 1951 election, becomes prime minister again, aged nearly 77.
What was his second term like?
Focused mainly on foreign affairs, managing the decline of the empire, Anglo-American relations, Suez, crises in Malaya and Kenya. He also had major health problems, including a serious stroke in 1953 that was kept secret from the public. Remarkable recovery, but he finally resigned in 1955. He did accept a knighthood in 53.
But stayed in Parliament.
Remained an MP until 1964. Got honorary U.S. citizenship in 63. He passed away in January 1965. Received a state funeral, a huge national event, reflecting his stature. Buried quietly near Blenheim.
Looking back, his legacy is just immense, but so complex. The writing alone.
Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953, not just for history, but for his speeches too. 6 volumes on World War II, a history of the English-speaking peoples. Incredibly prolific. And the painting, the bricklaying, joined a union. Breeding butterflies, his love of animals, a man of huge contrast and energy.
But impossible to ignore the criticisms, the affinity with war, the ambition driving his party changes, the imperialism.
Exactly. He earned mistrust for switching parties twice. Some saw him as reckless. He was definitely a paternalist social reformer wanting to improve things but within the existing structures. And as we discussed, the views on empire and race are deeply problematic by today's standards. It's crucial to acknowledge that full picture.
Yet he was voted the greatest Briton in that 2002 poll. He still holds this massive place in the public imagination.
He does. The memorials, the statues, the worship. His image as the defiant wartime leader endures powerfully.
So for you listening, grappling with leadership, with legacy, what do we take away? Churchill is such a paradox, isn't he?
Absolutely. Immense strength, incredible eloquence, rallied a nation. But also deeply flawed, controversial views, actions that need critical scrutiny. He embodies resilience, the power of words, conviction against the odds. But he's also a stark reminder that historical figures are products of their time. We have to engage with the whole person, warts and all. What aspect of his journey strikes you the most?
Thanks for listening. Write us your opinion in the comments on how historical leaders, despite their flaws, can still inspire future generations to overcome great challenges. Subscribe to the channel to help more listeners reach our episodes. Thank you and have an amazing day.